You know, when a single person holds absolute power over the lives and minds of their followers, their reign often ends in the most dramatic ways you can imagine. Today, we're going to dig into the final chapters of some of the most infamous cult leaders to see if we can find the chilling patterns behind their inevitable end. It's a really fascinating and honestly pretty disturbing question, right? These were people who commanded this unbelievable devotion, who could convince people to just walk away from their families, their money, even their own lives. So, what happens when their own time is up? Well, as we're about to see, their exits are rarely quiet. Yeah, from orchestrated mass suicides to fiery standoffs, and you won't believe this, even just mundane deaths in a prison hospital. The way these leaders die seems to perfectly reflect the kind of power they had. We're going to break down these patterns, and we'll start with the ones who saw death not as an end, but as some kind of graduation. So, our first category here involves leaders who convinced their followers that dying wasn't self destruction at all. No, it was a necessary step to get to a higher plane of existence, a glorious promised afterlife. It was basically their final grand performance. Take Jim Jones. He never called it mass suicide. He actually came up with the term revolutionary suicide. He completely reframed this ultimate act of desperation as some kind of political defiance, telling everyone that death was just moving to another level of existence. I mean, it was a total masterpiece of manipulation, right up to the very end. But the reality of it was absolutely horrifying. On that day in Guyana, they handed out this cyanide-laced punch. Parents were ordered to give the poison to their own children first. And if anyone hesitated, armed guards were there to make sure nobody could escape their revolutionary fate. Jones himself, though, he avoided the poison. He died from a gunshot wound to the head. The final death toll was just staggering. 909 people died in Jonestown that day. And the most heartbreaking number of all, 276 of them were children. An entire generation of the People's Temple just wiped out in a single afternoon. You'd think the horror of Johnstown would be a one-off thing, but the ideology behind it, that didn't die. Almost 2 decades later, another group would follow their leader into a passage. Only this time, they believed their destination wasn't some vague spiritual plane, but a literal spaceship. This was the final exit of Heaven's Gate. Their leader, Marshall Applewhite, convinced 38 of his followers that a UFO was hiding behind the Hale-Bopp comet, just waiting to beam their souls up to a higher level. And their preparations were so methodical. They recorded these cheerful farewell videos, took a fatal mix of drugs, and then suffocated themselves, all while dressed in identical uniforms. And when you look at them side by side like this, the parallels are just chilling. You've got different leaders, different decades, different methods, but the core idea is exactly the same. Rebrand suicide as a journey, a transit to some better place. For these leaders, death itself became the ultimate expression of their control. But not all cults end with some quiet, planned transit. Some go out in fire and fury. That happens when a leader's paranoid, us-against-the-world mentality finally smashes into the real world in a violent and very public showdown.
And this is exactly what went down with David Koresh and the Branch Davidians. What started as a raid over suspected illegal weapons just exploded into a deadly gunfight that kicked off a tense 51-day siege, with the FBI trying to negotiate with Koresh. It all came to a head when federal agents used tear gas to try and force everyone out, and then fires just erupted, consuming the entire compound.
In the end, 79 people died in the smoke and flames. Koresh was one of them, dead from a gunshot wound. But unlike Jones, it was never actually confirmed if he took his own life or if one of his followers killed him at his request. His end was just as violent and uncertain as the siege itself. And this refusal to be captured, it's a theme you see again and again with these types of violent figures. When Mexican police were closing in on the drug trafficker and cult leader Adolfo Constanzo, he didn't wait around for a standoff. No, he was cornered in an apartment and he ordered one of his last followers to just kill him. He chose a quick death over a slow one in prison. Okay, so what happens to the leaders who do get captured? For some, the legal system brings the final verdict. But for others, whose power was so absolute, their end comes from a different authority, either the state or a much more brutal form of justice waiting for them behind bars. Look at Shoko Asahara, the leader of Aum Shinrikyo. After he planned that deadly sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway, he was found hiding in a secret compartment inside a wall. His trial took forever, but the outcome was decisive: death by hanging. The state delivered his end more than 2 decades after his reign of terror. So Asahara's end was very clinical, very state-sanctioned. Roch it was the polar opposite. This guy was known for sadistically torturing his followers. He was serving a life sentence when his past caught up with him in the most direct way possible. Those were the actual chilling words of Theriol's own cellmate, who was also a murderer, just moments after he stabbed the former cult leader to death with a shiv. I mean, no trial, no appeal, just a final, violent act of revenge from another inmate. Okay, so we've seen grand delusional escapes, fiery confrontations, and brutal justice. But there's one last category, and maybe it's the most unsettling of all: the anticlimax. The quiet, unremarkable end of a man whose name is literally synonymous with chaos. For Charles Manson, there was no dramatic final act. No revolutionary suicide, no blaze of glory, not even a hangman's noose. His end was completely empty of all the mayhem he had created. He just got old. After decades behind bars, his health started to fail. He was taken to the hospital but was considered too frail for surgery, so they just sent him back to his cell to die. His end didn't come from a bullet or a noose, but just from the slow, inevitable decline of an 83-year-old man. And this is his official cause of death. It reads like any other medical report. It's clinical, it's biological, and it is utterly, completely mundane. For a guy who orchestrated so much chaos and prophesied a world-ending race war, this was the ultimate irony. I mean, think about that. For a man who built his entire legend on violence and anarchy, the most shocking end turned out to be no shock at all. Charles Manson's life didn't end with a bang, but with the quiet beeping of hospital machines. A totally anticlimactic finale for such a notorious life. So, their fates are as varied as their weird ideologies, from fire and poison all the way to a plain old prison hospital bed. But their deaths leave us with one final and kind of nagging question. Even after these figures of absolute control are gone, do the dangerous ideas they unleashed ever really disappear? Now that's something to think about.